Smarties, Steph and I are ridiculously excited for you to hear this episode. This episode is a masterclass with executive functioning expert Marydee Sklar. Marydee is the founder of the Seeing My Time program. You can learn more about it in this episode and also by going to her website, www.executivefunctioningsuccess.com. There are so many goodies in this episode that it actually became impossible for us to write an appropriate introduction to these next two episodes. Of course, we plan to just do one episode. We've now split this conversation into two episodes, so you'll hear the first part this week and the next part next week in episode 323. I don't want to waste any more time, but I do want to let you know that we did do a Patreon extended conversation with Marydee. We will be releasing that episode next week, because you really do need to listen to the entire conversation before listening to that Patreon. If you want to hear that extended conversation, and believe me, you do, go ahead and make sure you are a $5 a month monthly subscriber. Obviously, that $5 a month goes to support the podcast and the work that we're doing here. And we thank you through these extended conversations. You can go back as long as you want. They're all there, and other things that we throw up there for you guys as well. Again, to become a patron and listen to our Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/LearnSmarterPodcast. And that extended conversation with Marydee will be live next week. Let's dig in.
You want to learn faster, but sometimes working harder is just not the answer. You have to learn smarter. The Educational Therapy Podcast.
Hi, Smarties. Welcome to episode 322 of Learn Smarter, the Educational Therapy Podcast. I'm Stephanie Pitts.
And I'm Rachel Kapp.
And today we are thrilled to have executive functioning expert Marydee Sklar with us. Hi, Marydee.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on. This is very exciting to have you.
A treat for us.
Well, it's a treat for me because educational therapists helped me get started. Okay. I saw the value in my work before I even had it published. So I have a soft spot in my heart for educational therapists.
Oh.
Well, we both have used your work and your resources over the years, so we're just thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with you. But why don't you take a second and introduce yourself to our audience, explain a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I am primarily an educator. That is my background. I was a classroom teacher in a galaxy far, far away. That's how I describe myself. But I became very interested in executive functioning a long time ago, really before we even had the term, because I have a brain that has executive functioning challenges. And I did not understand that about myself. And speech pathologist, I was running a program at a local elementary school to teach volunteers to teach at-risk kids how to read. And I ended up, because of the speech pathologist on campus, taking some training with Dr. Ellen Arbor at the University of Portland, who's also a speech pathologist. And at the time, that was 1994, she had a very interesting concept. She felt that our behavior was directly tied to the way our brains are wired. Well, what you guys and most of the audience in the room are too young to understand, I'll be 71 soon, that was woo-woo in 1994. Okay, literally, it was woo-woo. We didn't have the brain scans. We didn't understand the brain anything like we do today. In fact, her accrediting organization, ASHA, they wanted to kick her out because she wasn't, it was like, you're going into a sphere that has nothing to do with speech and language. Okay. But Ellen just happened to be brilliant. Okay. And she was putting together the brain and behavior differences. I know this from hindsight. She was really focusing on a lot of the students we now would call neurodivergent. We used to say spectrum folks. Okay. That was really who was really intriguing her at the time. But we didn't have names for those either. Okay. We just didn't have terms to describe people. Anyway, so I got into that. She helped me start to understand my own brain and the connection, which was marvelous because it took away the guilt and the shame that I had for years. I described myself for over 40 years as an underachieving procrastinator. which is a terrible moniker to have hanging around your neck. I was always late. I was screaming at the kids to get out the door in the morning. My house is welcome to your piles. I would show up on the wrong day at the wrong time. I'd been successful in my life, but I always felt like everything was going to come crashing down. There was no sense of centeredness or self-esteem connected to what I was doing in the world. So I got into it because of my own brain, and then my son had challenges. And Ellen helped me think about time very differently. She told me, after spending a whole week with her in one of the seminar things, I had gone up to her and I said, Ellen, I came here to teach kids how to learn to read. That's what I was looking for, was information about brain and reading.
Right.
And I said, but you've given me this glimmer of insight into my own behavior connected to time. I'll pay you anything. Just anything. And so she had me draw. She said, oh, I confused you enough for this week. I will give you a free hour. But what I want you to do is to bring with you a drawing of a picture of what you need to do in the following 7 days, basically a plan for your week.
Okay.
And so I drew this picture, which since this is all audio, I'm just going to have to describe it to you. I drew this picture that took me 2 hours to draw. And it looks like total chaos. It's just like, it's got some images in it, but it's lots of words and it's just a mess. And Ellen took one look at it and she said, oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
It's what your brain felt like.
That's exactly. I show that picture all the time to people.
Yes.
And they just nod their heads going, yeah, that's my brain.
It's relatable.
That's what happens to me. So she had given me this advice at the end of an hour. We refined what it took to draw a picture for the week rather than have it be chaos and take me 2 hours. But at the end of the hour, I said, Ellen, wait a minute. There's way more to my problem than drawing a picture. I read every time management book, planning book, calendar system, you name it. I once brought home a book from the library that had time on the spine. I came home and my husband looked at it and he goes, honey, why did you bring this home? I said, it's about time. And he goes, honey, it has to do with physics, like deep space physics or something. And I said, really? I mean, I hadn't read the subtitle. I just grabbed it because it had time on it. Okay.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And so she gave me this advice, and I want everybody, you included, and all the people in the audience to wrap your lovely minds around this. This is her advice. She whips out her finger. That's kind of who Ellen is. She's a brilliant woman. But she kind of, boom, in her face, boom, she whips out her finger and she goes, go home. Take care of yourself in time and space and come back and see me. Got that? Come home, take care of yourself in time and space, and we'll talk. And so I felt like I'd gone to see the guru and I got a Buddhist conundrum. What does that mean? And so Melissa said, time and space, time and space, time and space, over and over again, because I forget things that people say to me pretty fast. And my car was a long way from her office where I parked.
Yeah, so you're just repeating it
I was
to
repeating
yourself.
It. This is the day before cell phones, I put it together enough to write it down, right? It's just like it was time and space, time and space.
And even if you had written it down, you would have lost the paper anyway. So
Absolutely. It would never have made the half a mile to the car.
Yeah.
So time and space, time and space. It took me a year to figure it out. She gave me the clues of time and space, and she gave me the clues that it was all connected to my brain. And that my brain, her theory back then, I don't know how, I haven't worked with her for quite a number of years. She described me as having a visual language system. Okay. Not visual learner. It's a different thing. Okay. It's more how you hold your interior language. And so I don't store things auditorially well at all. I just don't. If you do, if you have a sound brain or a picture brain, as I would describe it in my program, I am so far on the picture side, I have no sound. It's like I can't sing any songs. I don't know the words to songs. If you start singing them next to me, I can match pitches, but I can't sing any of the Beatles songs or the Beach Boys songs that I listen to.
Interesting.
I can't remember them. Okay. The only songs I remember are some Girl Scout songs that I sang over and over and over and over and over again.
At an early age.
Very early age. Other than that, nothing sticks. Okay. So anyway, time and space, got it figured out. And then my son had issues. His teacher, fourth graders, his teacher said he's being a complete flake, not turning anything in. Bright kid, no production. So he and I worked on paper management because my son was one of those kids who was walking around a black hole. It's like he lost everything. You know, it didn't matter what it was, jackets, shoes, books. He couldn't hold on to a piece of paper from his desk to the teacher's desk. You know, it was not impossible. And so I worked on it from the point of view of what his brain needed to see. Okay. And put together a little system. And after a few weeks, I said, Josh, is this helping any? And he paused. He was a very thoughtful little fourth grade kid. Now he's a very thoughtful 39-year-old. He said, yeah, not so stressful. I'm not getting in trouble for not turning in my work, you know. And so then I ended up starting to work with my friends' kids, where they were all hitting middle school. And they've been reasonably successful in elementary school, most of them, because the elementary school teachers give a lot of support.
Yep.
And you have one teacher?
One teacher, one system to understand. And when they hit middle school, boom, you know, the wheels fell.
Yep.
So that's who I thought I was going to work with. And people just started showing up on my doorstep, literally. It was all word of mouth. I never advertised for 15 years. I had a private practice of working with, I was a dyslexia specialist, working with dyslexia, making math real, and other language stuff I had learned from Ellen, supporting written language. So I was doing that after school. But these kids and these families started showing up who weren't getting things done. And back then we called it poor study skills. I mean, that was the only phrase that they kind of onto that behavior. So these people showed up, these kids. Initially, I just worked with the kids. But then I went and heard a behavioral pediatrician speak. And he talked about the brain and adolescent behavior. And that was my first brain piece of it. I went, oh, that's why the kids have it sitting in my room with me. They look like they've got it, right? But when they go home, they don't transfer it.
Right.
And so it all falls apart. So at that juncture, I made a decision, which I've stuck to all these years, is I never work with kids by themselves if they are living at home. I won't do it.
Okay. One
or more parents have to come there. They have to be part of the picture. Because from a developmental perspective, those brains, you can teach in quotation marks. You can talk to them all you want about strategies, but their brains, because of development, it's not going to stick. You know, it's a long-term process, these executive functioning skills. And so these brains need support for all the transition points when things change. When they go from middle school to high school to college, college to work, if somebody's not there helping them to scaffold that transition, their brains do not necessarily transfer the strategies that worked in situation A to the new situation B. It's very interesting. Some people pull it off, other ones really, really can't. Okay. So you have to have parents involved, because parents don't even realize that they need to be that kind of support, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mm-hmm. Have you listened to our podcast before?
And, so the parents come. And so anyway, for 15 years, people showed up. And I created the program that I now teach, which is called Seeing My Time. And now, how do I teach these people what I understand about time and space? Because you see, my approach to executive functioning is somewhat unique, unless people have been exposed to some of my work, okay? Right. Is that I'm an educator. I'm a reading specialist. I know how to teach in a very carefully scaffolded step-by-step program so that learning happens. It's hands-on, multisensory, so that learning happens. And most people miss that. Okay? They don't get it. It was like a couple of years ago, I was a keynote speaker at an event for a private school consortium. And a couple of teachers, bless their hearts, were talking on executive functioning. And I thought, I'm going to go. Because if they've got it, I can retire. I can be done, Yeah. And I sat there listening to them, and I just put my head in my hands, and I went, I don't have it.
You're like, you can't retire.
Just kidding.
They're doing the same old stuff wrong. I can't quit. Okay. So I'm still working. We're still educating teachers. But so I got into it that way. That was my history. And to my utter surprise, here I am today. It was ed therapists and speech pathologists who knew my work were sending me people, neuropsych sent me, all kinds of people sent me people. And they all wanted me to publish the work. And I was like, who'd buy it?
All
You
of
know,
us.
we made this around my dining room table. You know, I'm not a PhD person from some university, you know, but I was really doing research and I was applying what I understood from a learning perspective. And I'm also a learner. I'm always learning. Okay. So I turn over every rock possible to expand my personal knowledge and spent a lot of years and a lot of money educating myself about the brain and executive functioning and all. You know, I've hung out with all the big names and, you know, done training with them and everything else. And so what my brain is good at, it has executive functioning challenges, but it's a very creative brain, and it is a brain that synthesizes well.
Yeah.
It like takes concepts from very different domains and pulls them together, which I know is why Seeing My Time is as successful as it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I just ended up here kind of totally by accident. I didn't think I would ever be an entrepreneur of sorts. You know, we train people now around the world teaching Seeing My Time. We have programs for educators. We have programs for parents. We do distance. We do local. We do groups. We do have planners. You know, all kinds of things that I never imagined happening, but all makes sense as I look back over the back. So that's a quick dip into the whole thing. But I love my work and I'm still doing it because I have satisfaction. You know, now I primarily work with adults myself because I don't have the energy to deal with teenagers and parents after 3 in the afternoon. I just can't do it anymore. I put in my time.
Now it's up to the rest of us. So I guess my first sort of question for you is, what do you wish people, and that can be parents, teachers, therapists, learning specialists, whoever you want to make that people be, what do you wish people understood about time?
I'll go back to the concept that Arwood said about time and space. People think time is stretchy. Okay. That sometimes it seems to go slow and sometimes it seems to go fast. You know, we've got all those circumstances where it slows down and it goes short. Where'd the time go? Boom, gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's just heartbeats. Okay. So time doesn't stretch. So you can do more after dinner. I'll finish it this weekend. I'll get it all done. You know, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to stretch for you. Everything takes a certain amount of heartbeats. Okay. You can't be like super efficient. You can't multitask and make it all better. No, it's finite. It's very, very finite. And there are 3 truths of time in my program, Seeing My Time. And the third one is the way you use your time equals your life.
Yeah.
Heavy, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
What it is, okay, is that our choices we make every day about how we use our time equals the total sum of our lives. You know, so knowing that time takes up space, that it is the most valuable asset you have in your life, and you have no idea how much of it you've got.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't choose how much time we get to be here. Okay. So that would be my time thing, is that people are unrealistic about what they can do in a given space of time. So you have to teach them how to figure out how long things take to do. But then the other component that was not in my mind when I originally wrote Seeing My Time, for many years, I didn't really understand this, but the more and more I learned about the brain, the more I realized that when people want to talk about time management, which is kind of what's underlying, tell me about time, it's connected to time management. How do I get everything done? How can I juggle this stuff? You'll never get good at time management unless you understand your brain and you understand the impact of your emotional brain, your limbic system, because your emotional brain, it controls everything. We are not logical thinking people. Okay. We are actually emotional. All information enters our brain through our limbic system, all sensory information. And if our brain is at peace and calm and the world seems safe, then the amygdala, which we're going to focus on in the brain and the limbic system, it's like the security guard. It's evaluating everything that comes in. Am I safe or not? Okay. If the amygdala says, I'm safe, then that information goes into your brain and you can make good choices because you're accessing what I call your wise brain, your prefrontal cortex. But if there's something in the environment that sets off the amygdala, then it becomes what I call the bully in the brain. Some people call it the watchdog or something like that. There's different names for it. I call it the bully because it activates a chemical response in your brain that shuts down communication between the neurons in your brain to get access to your prefrontal cortex. So you're operating out of fight or flight, okay, and a freeze component, And this is one nobody talks about, desire. I want to, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that. Okay. So you have to get past desire, want to, don't want to, the 3-year-old in your voice or whatever, 5-year-old or whomever in your head, your fight, freeze responses. Because if you can't get out of that, if you're only acting out of that, you'll never get good with time management. You have to be able to understand your brain. So at this point in time, when I'm working with people, I always tell them, I just give you strategies, A, to understand your brain. Because when I teach Seeing My Time, it's typically a 10-hour course. And the first 3 hours, I don't even talk about time. We're always talking about the brain, the why you act the way that you act. And then I'm giving them ways of thinking about their behavior, thinking about their choices, understanding their brain. I have to lay the foundation. And that's what people skip. They skip the foundation. Let's go to the strategies. Here, use this timer, make this list, use this planner, it'll all work. No, because you're dealing with brains that are wounded. If you end up with somebody who is struggling, who has been struggling in school presently or in their past, struggling with work, and these are neurodivergent folks of the whole gamut, okay? Those people are wounded. And the reason they're wounded is that they have an integrity issue. They have failed. They have let themselves down and they've let the people around them down. They haven't met expectations. And so they're very defensive. And if they stay in defensive mode, that's in their emotional brain, they cannot change. It's fascinating. They cannot change. And my work, like I'm not a therapist, but what I'm doing is a kind of cognitive behavioral therapy where it's like you have to get them past that stuck point. You have to get them to this little space of time where they get a glimmer of hope. I can get better. And it's pretty miraculous when that happens. I have an adult client right now. Oh my gosh. This gentleman, in his intake form, it says, other diagnoses. What do you got?
Yeah.
I had to look up one of them because I'd never seen that. I'd never seen those letter combinations before. What is that? Okay. This poor man, he literally says, I'm just broken. I'm broken. I can't be fixed. And he's like 54 or something like that. Brilliant. Okay. Such a wonderful mind, but no self-concept of being able to be capable. Because he was always told, you're not living up to your potential. You're being lazy. Blah, 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 blah. So it's been really interesting. Little by little, I'm getting him I had him smile, the other way. But little by little, he's beginning to adapt and believe. It's a tiny thing. But he's using metacognition because you have to change people's way of thinking. That's the other thing about this time thing. Yeah. I can't change you. I can't change anybody. This is for the educators out there, for the ed therapists. Folks, step off your pedestal. You don't change anybody. Okay.
Yep.
They change themselves. You set up the situation and help them develop that metacognition. That's thinking about your thinking. You're thinking about, why am I making these choices? You help them start to analyze it. And then you give them the wings, as I said, I like to send them out the door and they're gone, they're flying at that point, tentatively, you don't get fixed overnight, but you've given them the underlying skills. So time is really complicated. It's invisible. So you have to make it concrete and real, spatial. You have to help people think of it spatially. So you have to make it concrete and visible when you're talking about it, when you're working with it. And then you have to help them understand that their emotional brain gets in the way of their decision making when it comes to their choices. Complex stuff.
Can you say that again?
Making them understand that their behavior is tied to their emotional brain. So that if they have control over that emotional brain, if they're aware of their emotional brain, then they can use metacognition, think about their thinking, to override that other voice, that negative voice that says, I can't, I don't, I never.
Yeah.
Steph, why did you ask her to repeat that?
Because I just thought it was powerful.
Yeah.
This is complicated work, you guys, and I think that's the challenge. I mean, from my perspective, everybody and their brother is an executive functioning coach right now. Because 10 years ago, LDA conference in 2010, 11, 12, and put up my little booth up, my company's Executive Functioning Success, and I sat there with my books. And I had people on the LDA board come by and say, what is this? That wasn't that long ago, you guys.
Mm-mm.
And 2 years later, it was the headliner, right?
Yeah.
But what happened historically is that executive functioning back then, people got it. It was a bandwagon for a brief period of time. It was a little bandwagon. Education is full of the buzzwords, right?
Yep.
Totally.
Let's get on this bandwagon. Okay. It didn't last very long, but it was set for those kids.
Yep.
Okay. It was all about those kids, the kids on IEPs, the kids on 504s. All right. So what changed, I had created a program for classroom teachers, a program called Building Executive Functioning Skills in the Classroom. And talk about labors of love. You guys were talking about your work being a labor of love. I wanted to create a professional development program that I could share with classroom teachers about everything I wish I had known about the brain and learning before I ever entered a classroom. If only I had known that. So I put my heart and soul and 6 months of my life into creating this program. So this was 7, almost 8 years ago now. And what happened then? The bottom fell out of funding for professional development. It disappeared from school budgets. Gone. Around the country, particularly in Oregon, they took away the requirement for continuing ed because they were trying to save money because districts were funding teachers to do professional training, which is such a tragedy because I learned so much, always keeping my credential current for professional development. So anyway, so I had this beautiful course. And a year later, Portland State University didn't even have a summer professional development program anymore for teachers. And I was like, I'm always more into it. So I sat there and kind of languished. We left it on the website, but we were really happy if we got 5 people to find us,
Yep.
And then along came COVID. Okay. And COVID really switched things around because it was so hard on educators, so hard on families. Oh my gosh, those first 3 months, I had parents and kids screaming at each other and crying all the time. It was a mess. And so it was crazy, all this distance learning, all the stressors. Well, if you stop and think about what I said earlier about the emotional brain, right? Our brains, the world's brains, okay, we're all on high alert thinking we might die. And so we forget about it. We're really good about putting history out of our minds. We're only interested in the present. Not that long ago, there were mass graves in New York City. Okay. And so it was this time of just total upheaval. Everybody was struggling in the education world. Parents were struggling in the education world. Then things started to settle down again. And I got a call from a local private school that I've done different trainings with through the years. They called and said, Marydee, can you come and talk to us again about executive functioning for a professional development class? And it had been a couple of years since I'd been there. I said, yeah, sure. They happened to be really close to my house. And so I was like,
Easy.
I'm willing to get up and go. It's a mile away from my house. And I got there and they were almost all the same teachers. Okay. And some of those teachers had taken my courses. What am I going to tell you guys? There's nothing earth-shatteringly different about executive functioning in the time span. The audience was different. They now saw that executive functioning impacted all of their students and impacted themselves. Because what happens, it's very interesting. I heard this at a conference where anxiety is an emotion, all right? It's part of that sympathetic nervous system responses or parasympathetic, actually. But anyway, it's a nervous response. So anxiety, emotion. When we're under high anxiety, it has a negative impact on working memory. Okay. It diminishes our working memory capacity. Well, working memory is critical for all of our executive functions. So one of my neuropsych friends put it this way. If all of your executive functioning skills, and I'm talking about things like goal-directed persistence, sustained attention, time management, planning and organization, that's just to name some of them. If all of those skills are pathways or highways in your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain behind your forehead. Okay, if those are pathways, working memory is the tunnel that all those pathways, those highways have to use. So if your working memory capacity is smaller, then not all the highways can get through. There's conversion at the block, it gets stuck. Well, during that COVID time, everybody was experiencing that high anxiety and everybody was struggling. I had my friends who were good executive functioners were falling apart. And they were like, what happened to me? I used to be able to do all this stuff. How come I can't finish a book? How come I'm showing up late? How come I can't do X, Y, and Z? So that anxiety went way up and production went down with working memory. So it was fascinating. So the teachers were sitting there really relating to the fact that no longer was it executive functioning about them. It was about all of us.
Yep.
It's about all of our choices every day. So what was fascinating to me was that the enrollment in my courses just went boom. Okay. So now we have very full, robust courses of amazing teachers, okay, who are applying this to all subject matters across the curriculums in different age groups. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It took a long time for that to happen. It took years for it to come, but it's really rewarding because that's what executive functioning is it's part of our choices. It's all about our choices. And if we understand our brain, then we have choice. We can actually have that conversation and we can maximize our potential. That's my mission in life, is to help people maximize their potential. Each of us have a unique potential. Each of us have a unique brain. And how do you figure out how to hack it? That's how I tell people. Say, hack your brain. Don't let it get in the way. Who's in charge? You or your brain? They look at me like, what?
Fair.
Yeah.
So we talk about time and not letting it control you, but you controlling it, and production and the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it and how you need to do it and
where to do it,
and the difference of want and need, because that is a lot of when the parents call and say the trigger word of lazy that we all feel is just so constantly reminding everyone, the parents that I speak to, that if your child could, they would.
Right.
So I'm sort of interested in when you're talking to the teachers about this, what have you noticed how they have started to approach that from your courses?
I have 2 courses. Okay.
Okay.
And one course was originally designed, it's called Teaching Seeing My Time. It goes with the workbook. Okay. It's a curriculum, basically. And the market for that originally I saw as ed therapists. Okay. And so ed therapists use it, speech paths use it, OTs use it. There's a whole bunch of different people who use it, but I didn't see that in the classroom too much. Okay? The reason being, schools don't want to spend any money on workbooks, right? And it would be time in the school schedule is so oppressive to teachers. They've obviously all this curriculum, all this stuff I have to cover. Add one more weird thing to my life and it won't work. Whereas I'm sitting here going, oh my God, if you just invested 10 hours up front in September, October, your whole school year would go so much better. Okay.
It's front loading a calendar right
they
there.
Just can't do it. It's really interesting. One of the schools that has a public school, okay, which is rare, okay, because of funding. The one public school that is consistently still using Seeing My Time workbooks, okay, and my planners, okay, is a relatively poor district. When I came to speak, I charged them $500, okay, which is pretty darn low for a speaking engagement, and I drove to get there, okay, like an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
When I got there, I was in the auditorium, small school, middle school. They had to split the middle school budget had $250, the principal, and they got $250 from the superintendent's fund. Okay, to come up with $500. All right. The reason why they still use it, you know who was in the room? The superintendent. He was in the room. So it's a leadership issue in part. Getting a hold of them is really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys figure it out, let me know. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're the leadership at the top. Like I said, professional development training has just plummeted. You know, we used to be invited to public schools all the time. I did a lot of training with lots of people, and the money just dried up and disappeared, you know, prior to COVID even. So I didn't think people would come, teachers would end up in teaching Seeing My Time. That has changed in the last year. I have a lot of classroom teachers and learning specialists taking that course. And that is wonderful because, again, that's very carefully scaffolded, you know, and it's a program in a box, you know. I mean, it's just like, follow this, you do this, and it will work, okay? You will have results. So then the other course, the building executive functioning skills in the classroom, that came about because of an educator who took my first course, and she wanted to put more stuff about the brain and learning in, which I didn't really have the background in. So I didn't feel like at that point in time, I was able to speak to that. How would I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And she happened to be a Stanford PhD person. And she goes, "Oh, Marydee, we can do this." And she kind of, took me by the hand and found me resources. That course I designed thinking what my goal was to have teachers come away, no matter what subject area they were in, to be able to integrate teaching executive functioning into their daily curriculum. Integrate it, not as a separate thing, but integrate it. And I wanted to do it by going to the brain. The whole course at the beginning is all about brain learning. It's a great course. People love it. Okay. They love both of the courses. The educators, parents, whoever takes it, I signed up for this to help kids, but oh my God, this is changing my life.
Yeah, helping me. Yeah.
But then so seeing my time, because the beginning of that whole course is mostly brain and learning stuff. Again, I'm a designer, I'm a creative. And I'm a teacher. Okay. So all the videos are short and distinct. It's like user friendly, it's learner friendly. So seeing my time then is actually the concepts are at the end of that course. Okay. Because I didn't expect the teachers to be able to run a course with the workbook. But I then help them understand how they can implement the same core concepts without the program. That said, what I always tell everybody is and figure out a way to communicate with your parents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I wrote my book, 50 Tips to Help Students Succeed, was because seeing my time was beginning to be used in schools. And I had a problem with that because of the transference of information, parents not understanding brain development, not understanding executive functioning, labeling their kids lazy,
Yep.
sending their kids off to private school, thinking the private school people are going to fix them. Okay.
Yep.
So I wrote that book for them. Because I know you have it, Steph. Mm-hmm. It's very carefully written. There's most of the tips are 700 words or less. Why? Because parents don't have time to read more than that. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're very targeted. Because there were books written for parents out there on executive functioning, most of which I could not get through.
You have to have good executive functioning skills to get through the EF books. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you get to the end, they'll say, "And now what am I supposed to do?"
Right. What's the takeaway?
So I wanted this book to not be that way.
It's definitely not.
Yeah.
It's definitely
go to where you need.
Go to where you need. Yeah. I love how it's broken down and where it's showing up in different parts of their lives as well. It's not just getting homework done. So,
which guides me into my next question. We did do a Patreon extended conversation with Marydee. We will be releasing that episode next week because you really do need to listen to the entire conversation before listening to that Patreon. If you want to hear that extended conversation, and believe me, you do, go ahead and make sure you are a $5 a month monthly subscriber. Obviously, that $5 a month goes to support the podcast and the work that we're doing here. And we thank you through these extended conversations. You can go back as long as you want. They're all there, and other things that we throw up there for you guys as well.